hands. From Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, this is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at Case Western. Finally, I'm getting to bring you this episode. I'm sorry for the delay. It's been a little busy around here as we've transitioned to working from home, so I've just been a little bit backed up. We had the AAMC's second virtual fair recently, and we were slammed. It was great to chat with so many people, and also many listeners stopped by our little virtual booth and said hi, so that was really cool too. At the virtual fair, we got a lot of questions about how the COVID-19 has disrupted everything, and I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now for pre-meds. Universities are going to pass no pass or pass no pass optional, and MCAT dates are being canceled, and summer internships are in jeopardy, and you're unable to shadow or volunteer right now, and many are wondering what this means for prospective applicants. Well, I hope to bring you some answers or some reassurance. I'm working on a COVID-19 episode right now with Dr. Maida. She's the Dean of Admissions here at my medical school, and so I hope to get that out to you here real soon. So hang in there. Okay, in this episode, it's another one of those that came directly from listener suggestions. That's you. After I'd put a call out for your suggestions, I would get Vermont. So this is for you. My guest, Cary, is just great. So I'm excited to bring you all the information she has waiting for you. And let me tell you, if you have a question for me or want to send me your wish list of schools that you want me to try to get on the show, then you can hit me up at allaccess@case.edu. That's allaccess@case.edu. All right, let me tell you about my guest today. Cary Jukes was raised in Connecticut before attending Northwestern University, where she graduated with a degree in English and creative writing. She worked for several years in newspaper and trade magazine publishing before getting married and then moving to Vermont. There, she worked as an assistant manager at a Barnes & Noble bookstore. She stopped working for a while after the birth of her two sons and then began working at the University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine. She was an admissions application reader there for about 10 years. The stories of the applicants so fascinated her that she came to work full-time, moving from a reader to an admissions representative, then to assistant director of admissions, and finally in July 2014 to the director of medical school admissions. She earned her master's in education in 2019 as well. In addition to work, she also enjoys travel and theater and reading and writing and movies, and we get into some of that stuff, some of her personal faves in our conversation. Let me give you a snapshot of their medical school. The University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine is located in Burlington, Vermont, along the shores of Lake Champlain. UVM has two campus locations, the main campus in Burlington and the other in Danbury, Connecticut, which is on the western edge of the state of Connecticut. We get into how the med school uses these two campus sites during our discussion, too. The mission of UVM is to educate a diverse group of dedicated physicians and biomedical scientists to serve across all the disciplines of medicine, to bring hope to patients by advancing medical knowledge through research, to integrate education and research to advance the quality and accessibility of patient care, and to engage with their communities to benefit Vermont and the world. The Larner College of Medicine at UVM is a public medical school and accepts applicants from out of the state as well as those applicants that have the DACA status. In fact, about 70% of their classes are comprised of students from outside the state of Vermont. They also accept applicants from Canada, but they must have permanent residency here in the U.S. For the entering class of 2019, the medical school received 6,759 applications and interviewed 599 applicants for a class size of 124. 54% of their 2019 entering class were comprised of women, and 20% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. So there you go. Let's dive into it with Cary Jukes from the University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine. Hey, Cary, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Christian. I'm really pleased to be joining you today.
Yeah, this is great. You and I were just kind of chatting before I hit the record button that I hear a lot from listeners and they say Vermont, Vermont, Vermont. So I was so thrilled when you were willing to come on to feed the listeners everything we're going to talk about Vermont today. So it's awesome to have you here.
Great. Well, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. Hey, before we get all into Vermont, let's tell me a little bit about you. I just read your bio sketch to everybody, but what do you like to do in the Burlington area or South Burlington area? What's going on that you check out?
So Burlington's a great little town. It's not really big. The whole surrounding area is about 150,000 people. We're right on Lake Champlain. There are actual beaches. If you grew up like I did on the actual beach, like the Atlantic Beach in Connecticut, you would not consider it a real beach, but it does have sand and there is water. So that in the summer, a lot of people love to go down to the beach. There's a bike path that runs all along the lake. Yeah. So people can run or rollerblade or bike there. And it's just beautiful looking across at the Adirondack Mountains. It's just gorgeous. And you can actually see that view from the top floor of the medical school. So that's kind of cool also. Yeah. It's a great town. There's a lot of craft brew pubs. So there's a huge little grouping of different kinds of beers that people like to go sample. There's some good local theater, a lot of artists. Burlington's has a reputation as a pretty crunchy town and a lot of artsy type of people. So there's lots of people have art studios around, and certain times in the fall and the spring, they open up their studios so people can go in and look at the artwork people have been creating over the winter. It does get cold here, speaking of winter. So I think one of the keys to surviving Burlington is having something that you like to do in the winter months. Yeah. For most people, that's skiing. We are very close to some really top-notch skiing. We're about half an hour, 45 minutes from Stowe. Yeah. And a bunch of other different ski places. But there's also hiking, there's snowshoeing. I myself like to ice skate in the winter. Oh, cool. So I think if you can find something that you enjoy during those months, it really helps get through them, because it's a little bit longer winter than a lot of people are used to.
Yeah, but it looks beautiful. I mean, I've not been, but it looks like a beautiful place. And if you're outdoorsy, doesn't sound like you can get much more outdoorsy than that.
Yeah, it is really, really outdoorsy.
Yeah. Hey, you have an interesting I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have an interesting background, but and I just read that to everybody, but what's something you find people are kind of surprised to learn about you?
I guess the thing that people are really surprised to learn about me is that I am a 3rd degree black belt in Taekwondo.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I do during the winter, because you do it all year round. But So I've been studying Taekwondo for about 15 years. And I started doing it when my kids started doing it, because it looked like so much fun when they were doing it. I was like, I want to too. So neither of them do it anymore. But now I'm still practicing
it's mom's thing
every
now.
week.
Oh, that's great.
Mom's thing
that's
now.
Great. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, hey, let's get right into the curricular things. And when you go out and you're visiting different colleges and universities and meeting pre-medical students or prospective applicants, and the curriculum comes up, I mean, I read through all the interesting things that it's called the Vermont Integrated Curriculum, the VIC. Or do you call it the VIC or the VIC?
We call it the VIC.
VIC. All right.
Yeah.
What are those things? What are those highlights of those first couple years that you want people to know about?
So the first couple of years, so the VIC is divided into 3 parts. There's the foundations level, the clerkship level, and the advanced integration. Okay. And the foundations level actually is not the whole first 2 years. It's about a year and a half. It ends at the end of January of your second year. And the foundations level is where we do the basic science. But because it's integrated, it's also integrated with clinical medicine, as well as, so it's organ systems based. And so it goes from the microscopic to the population level. So when you're like learning about the heart, for example, not only do you learn about what it looks like microscopically, but you learn how to do that particular examination of the patient. You also, dissect the heart at that point, and then look at it in population control. So it's all like across the board. So the first course that everybody takes is called the Foundations of Clinical Sciences, and that's the whole first semester. It's divided into 3 blocks, and that you're doing not only learning about, taking care of patients, but also doing the, dissecting the cadavers and doing all the different areas of clinical science all together. So you're doing histology, you're doing pharmacology, you're doing biochemistry. So it's all together. So it's in context, because we know that adults learn best in context. And so the information is sort of presented in a way that you're going to see it as a physician.
Cool. Let me interrupt you real quick and ask you, so that first year sounds like it's when you're starting things off, the foundational piece. I read that you have a lot of team-based learning and small groups and some lectures, and that you're transitioning to 100% active learning. Can you explain what that means a little bit?
So that's a pretty recent technique that we've started using. I mean, we've always used it. It's just going up to that level is what's new. They have kind of stepped back a little bit from 100%. Now it's going to be more like 90%.
Okay, so pretty close.
Pretty close. But, some things just make more sense delivered in lectures. But actually, now that we have gone to mostly active learning, students complain when they have lectures because they find that they understand the material so much better when it's presented in an active learning manner. So there's a number of ways that that's accomplished. And what it basically looks like is you get pre-information before class. It might be a video, it might be a paper to read, it might be a chapter to read, it might be slides to go through. And then when you come to class, you take, and a lot of them, especially for team-based learning, you would take a quiz about how much you understood the material. Then in a small group, you would take that same quiz together, and then based on how people are understanding the material, the professor can guide the conversation around the things that people may be having trouble with. Then everybody gets a problem that they work on together. And the thing about active learning is the idea is that you keep coming back to the same material in spaced retrieval, so that when you keep going back to it and keep learning it, then you're going to remember it better. That there's something like when you learn something in a lecture, after you cram and study for the exam, like right after the exam, you don't remember 90% of it. Whereas it's kind of flip-flopped for active learning methods. So our students, when they're studying for step 1, are finding out that the material that they learned in an active manner, they're able to retrieve a lot better. And we're really committed to this. And it's all evidence-based. And I think that that's one of the things that's really great about it, is that it's not just, somebody's idea of what's a good way to learn, but it's based on science. And that's what we're teaching our students to do as far as medicine is going. So it makes a lot of sense to apply that to teaching as well. And that's one of the things also, is that we have a teaching academy here. So most medical schools have a lot of people teaching in the curriculum. A lot of them are physicians who volunteer their time. But, not everybody has always learned how to teach. So the Teaching Academy allows physicians to come in and learn how to teach better, and learn how to apply these active learning techniques to the material that they want to present. So it's really great for our students because the teachers are much better.
Right. It's not just, I was asked to come and give a lecture, and I threw some slides together, and here we go. Like they're given some prep as to how you want that to be explained to the students in your methodology. Oh, a lot of translational stuff going on there.
Yeah, there's like a whole team that helps them put these together and to make the material as engaging as possible. So it's really something that has been very, very popular with the students and very successful.
Very well thought out. Very cool. One of the common questions we get, Cary, is how soon can I see patients? How often do I get out and see patients at your school? What's it look like at Vermont?
So the class as a whole sees their first patient on the first day of orientation.
Oh.
And they sort of go through it together as a group, and then they break into smaller groups and discuss as well. And then for the rest of that semester, it's pretty much standardized patients that they see.
Okay.
Learning how to take a head-to-toe body exam and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in March of their first year is when they start a course called Doctoring in Vermont,
Cool.
where they're paired with usually a primary care physician, but not in every single case, in the community, where they go and they work with them. I think it's like 8 different total sessions where they work with this same preceptor who goes through all of patient care with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they start seeing real patients.
Okay. I think this has come up before in other conversations. And like I said, that's a common question. I think admissions people get it. And once we explain it to pre-med students that like there's some onboarding that has to take place before we really let you out there to start really seeing patients. So, very similarly, I think a lot of schools do that first semester is really the onboarding and teaching you how to do a physical and how to take a history and that kind of thing before we put you in front of real patients, because we want you to be best prepared and not feel humiliated that you don't know what you're doing, because you're probably naturally going to be a little nervous anyway. So,
yeah. And we know that people come in with different levels of clinical exposure and different comfort levels. So we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page when they go out there. Exactly.
When it comes to that, what's a typical week like in that first year or so, that first year and a half? What's their schedule look like so that listeners can get an idea of what life can be like as a med student at your school?
Yeah. So, well, it varies depending on the course.
Okay.
But say in the focus course, that Foundations of Clinical Science, that students would have work that they would have to do at home. Like I said before, maybe reading a chapter, reading or watching a videos, and then they come to class during the day. Because we have a lot of pre-work for it, probably a lot of classes are maybe half a day in class, and then you have work after or before, depending on how you look at it. I know that the second course they take, the one after the Christmas break, is called Attacks and Defenses, and that one is pretty much half a day of classes and then half a day of prep. So focus is more 8 to 4, you're here kind of days. We also do have a course that runs longitudinally through the first year called Professionalism, Communication, and Reflection. Everybody has that once a week where they come at the end of the day. They have a small group with a faculty advisor. They have curriculum that they work through, but it's also a time to sort of check in with each other and to make sure that people are maintaining a good work-life balance. It is a lot of work. I think that because
it is, yeah.
And I think that a lot of people are kind of shocked, at how much work it actually is when they get there. And so that this is like a way to sort of get grounding and to make sure that you're getting all the things that you need.
Yeah. When I read it, when I was doing my homework here about your school, that there's a thing called a scholarly project that students need to do. Is that required? And if so, can you describe what is the scholarly project, and is it required?
It is required. It is one of the requirements of the advanced integration level. And the scholarly project can be either research or teaching. So teaching might be being a TA in one of the first level foundations level classes. It could be other kinds of teaching. We do have like a SimTern, an intern that works in our simulation lab, helping teach with the standardized patients. So that can count as your teaching month. I'd say about 75% of students do the teaching part, and about 25 end up doing research.
Oh, wow.
The research can be something that you have worked on before. We do have fellowships that people can apply for at UVM in the summer between their first and second year. There's a lot of sort of informal opportunities to get involved in research. Like if we're a small enough institution that if you have a professor in class and you like the sound of the research that they're doing, you can send them an email. And usually the only limiting factor of getting involved is time.
Right.
So if you start doing research in that way, you can build on that towards your scholarly research project. The scholarly research projects are presented at the end of April, right before graduation, for people who choose to go that route. And there's a variety of different, so it can be basic science, it can be translational, it can be clinical. There's pretty much no barriers as to what kind of research you have to do.
Oh, wow. That's great. It culminates that, do they have to do like a manuscript or something for that research or that scholarly piece, like write something up?
Yeah, I mean, well, it could be a poster, I think,
Okay.
and it could be, they do have to present it at a forum that they have for those. And it could be slides or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That sounds like a really interesting, it forces everybody to do some, like a scholarly project, really expand their knowledge. And at that point, it's in the advanced integrated curriculum, integration. Yeah. So now we're getting into this third year and fourth year, it sounds like. What do those rotations look like? If we could go that way, because I read that you have two campuses, the main one in Vermont and Burlington, and then you have this one down in Connecticut. What's that all about?
So at the end of foundations, we have students take step one. So that is just about right now. And students who are second years are about to start their clinical clerkships. And so it gets complicated, so bear with me. So we have
med school curriculum it doesn't run on a regular calendar. So I think we all have this kind of struggle to walk people through what our curricula look like, because we don't operate on a regular academic calendar. So hang in there with her.
Yeah.
Hit it.
All right. So in March of your second year, you start clerkships. Now, there's two kinds of clerkships. There's the traditional block clerkships, where you do rotations in different specialties for 6 to 7 weeks. Pretty common specialties that all medical schools do, surgery, OB-GYN, psychiatry, etc. Then we also have something called the longitudinal integrated clerkship, which is where you are placed in a primary care practice, either in central Vermont or upstate New York. We have about 8 slots that are available for students to do that kind of a clerkship. And that clerkship is, you stay in the same practice the whole year. And instead of doing the different specialties in 6-week blocks, you do them as they come up in your patients.
Oh, cool.
So, for example, if you have a patient who's pregnant who suddenly needs surgery, you follow them into surgery, you get your surgery objectives met in that way instead of in isolation. So the thing that's great about it is that you get embedded in the community, you know your patients, you can do some research and help the community. And some people really prefer doing their clerkships that way, as opposed to the traditional block clerkships.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we made up, but we definitely are looking to expand that. But then going back to the block clerkships, those are what are done at either Vermont or Connecticut.
Okay.
So most of our students do them in Vermont. 35 students will do theirs in Connecticut. Our class size is 124, so you can see most people do it in Vermont. But Vermont could mean anywhere in the state of Vermont as well as in upstate New York.
Oh, really?
And the ones in Connecticut are done primarily at Norwalk and Danbury hospitals.
Wow.
So everybody would still do the same clerkship rotations, just in the 2 different hospitals. The Connecticut campus is new as far as having doing the whole set of block clerkships all in one place. Before, we had people switching back and forth, and that was really hard on people. You'd be 6 weeks in Vermont, 6 weeks in Connecticut, 6 weeks in Florida, and then back to Vermont, so people couldn't get any continuity, and, living situations were all convoluted. So, and then also we thought that, like being in the longitudinal integrated clerkship where you're in one place for a whole year, it just is a little bit easier on your personal life, I think, and offers you some opportunities to be able to do longitudinal research and things like that you couldn't get if you were moving around every 6 weeks.
Yeah. If somebody goes to the Connecticut campus, is there housing there for them, or are they kind of just on their own, but they kind of know these are the areas or places where most previous third years got arranged housing?
Yeah, so basically, it's just like if you were here, where you would be expected to find your own apartment, you would have your own apartment in Connecticut. But like I said, because you're not moving around all the time, you can actually do that. And because you know ahead of time, we do accept people into the campus. So when they are accepted as in the foundation's year, they know they're going to be going to Connecticut, so they have time to plan for that.
Okay, we'll get to that stuff when it comes to that, because that's a part of the application process, right? Or after you interview. Kind of thing.
Yeah, after we interview, we ask them to.
Okay, well, we'll hold off on those details.
Okay.
And get into that stuff here in a few minutes. Let's see, what else did I want to ask you about the third year, or like what haven't we talked about in the whole across the 4-year curriculum that, or maybe some highlights or things that you wish people knew more about regarding the curriculum?
So I'll go back to the foundations level real quickly. So I talked about that professionalism, communication, reflection class where you're in a small group with an academic advisor. In your second year, in the beginning of your second year, that group, instead of just meeting and talking about themselves, takes on a public health research project together.
Oh, wow.
And that's working with a community organization that has a real world problem that they need solved. And then you work and you do some public health research, and then that culminates in a poster presentation in January. Everybody does it. It's a requirement. And about half of those presentations, we do 16 a year, about half of them get invited to present at the National Public Health Conference that's held every year. Who knows if it will be anymore. Just kidding. Right. But you know what I mean, because of everything going on right now. But so, it's a really great opportunity for our students if some of them get published. Because we're a small state, they can have a big impact. Like several of our public health projects have been asked to testify before the state legislature as they consider different public health policies that they might pass. So it's a really great opportunity for our students to get involved in real problems in the community and help solve real public health problems. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, of all the schools I've talked to so far, I've not heard of a school that has an integrated public health piece or project in the curriculum. And I think we're starting to see, at the time we're recording this, the gaps in our public health, issues nationally, and why it's so important to have a solid foundation in public health across our communities. And now we're feeling the effects of a lack of continuity across our communities. So, yes,
very true.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
And so the other thing I would point out is that because the foundations level ends in March of the second year, that means that the clerkships end in March of your third year, which means that you start the advanced integration part in March of your third year. And that's the elective part of your education, which is where you can do audition rotations, where you can explore different areas that you might be interested in for residency, not only subject areas, but also locations of hospitals that you might want to do your residency in. So our students have extra time to get in all those electives. Most schools start the elective portion of their education in June or July of the fourth year.
You're right.
And our students start in March. So they have March, April, May, where they're not really competing against as many students trying to get rotations at different hospitals. So it's a real big advantage for our students to do that. Plus they have some extra time because you have to know what your specialty is by September.
Exactly.
So it gives them that extra time. Some people, when they go through clerkships, like everything is wonderful and they can't, it's hard to narrow it down. And so it gives them that extra time to sort of explore specialties and subspecialties so that they can make the best decision for what they want to do with their life.
Yeah, I think some schools are starting to look a little closely at that third year curriculum and how they might need to modify it a little bit to get students out of third year earlier due to the change in the future pass fail of step one. so that students can get out and do more audition rotations, because they're thinking maybe that might be more important for students in trying to secure a future match someplace. So while some schools may be having to make some adjustments, it sounds like Vermont's already there, with giving students the time. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a long time. And even before the VIC was created, we always had sort of early clinical introduction, and our students have really do really well on the clinical end. So,
one more thing, another common question: what about global opportunities? Do you have relationships or partnerships or opportunities for students to do things outside of the U.S.?
We do. Our global health office is based in our Connecticut campus, and we have a lot of partnerships with different organizations around the world: Uganda, Dominican Republic, Kazan, Russia, and so students can go during that summer between the first and second year. Quite often, it's an application process, but you can go. You don't have to be on the Connecticut campus to apply for it. But if you are on the Connecticut campus, the thing is, a lot of visiting people from the other countries come to the Connecticut campus, and so you might interact with people more from different countries in Connecticut, So then you also have opportunities in your advanced integration to go back if you went that summer to the same place and sort of be a mentor for the students that are the first years. But then, some people didn't do it during their summer between the first and second year. So there's still opportunities for students to go in that fourth year.
Wow.
And then not only the programs that we have at UVM, but also students do other programs as well. So it's not just limited to what we have to offer, but as long as it's an accredited program, students can do a lot. And that's part of the advanced integration, is it's sort of self-designed based on what the students' career goals are. So there's a lot of flexibility with how that goes.
Sounds like there's enough, like you said, flexibility and some gaps, whether it's summer vacations or summer break and stuff, to work in some of these opportunities to go do some global health experiences at some point if you want to, through your school. Let me ask you, I asked you earlier what you like to do for fun in that area, but what do students do when, you see them? What do the students do what do they get involved in, or what do they do for fun in the area there?
Well, a lot of them like to ski. A lot of people like outdoorsy things, biking, going down to the lake. And then there are a ton of student interest groups. So students are involved in the arts. They're involved in cooking. They're involved in, volunteering in elementary schools. So there's a ton of different student interest groups that students can join. A lot of times, if a student has a particular interest and there isn't a student interest group, they can create it. So that's really nice flexibility for students to create the things that they like to do. There's a literary magazine that students put together. Nice. They have a talent show every year. Some years it might be more musical years. So there'll be students that create, like a string quartet, and they'll play, sometimes they just play in the lobby during lunch, and it's just amazing. Yeah. It's really great that they share that. There's intramurals. They can use all the UVM gym facilities. We have every year we play against Dartmouth in the Specimen Cup in a hockey tournament.
Oh, that's a big deal. Yeah.
And so there's all different kinds of things that people do.
Sounds like a great community. It sounds like a friendly, collegial community.
It definitely is. And I think that we're the right size for that. So it's big enough that you can have opportunities with different kinds of people, but small enough that everybody's pretty supportive and everybody knows each other, and it's very warm and comforting and supportive.
What do you hear your students saying, just kind of maybe anecdotally, or you talk to students to say they like about the medical school or about the curriculum? Have you heard some themes?
I guess the themes that I hear is that they really like the fact that it's non-competitive and that people are out to help each other rather than looking out for number one.
Yeah.
it's really wonderful to see people share notes, people share different ways of learning things, like that worked for them. And there's not a lot of competitive feeling. So people are not worried about that. People just want to help each other through stuff because it's hard.
Yeah.
And they, have this unshakable bond with each other. And it's really very wonderful to see.
Oh, that's great. I guess lastly, before we switch and talk about the admissions piece, you've been there a while now, and you work very closely with from a admissions perspective with prospective students and current students. What's something that you wish people knew about Vermont that you can't find on a shiny website, that you wish you want to get it out there to people, that you wish, a myth you want to dispel or something like that?
Well, oh, wow, that's a good one. I guess I would say that a lot of people think that Vermont is this really remote area that, is completely isolated, and you might think it's really rural, but Burlington itself is a really cosmopolitan little town. It's not big. There's not a lot, but, it's really pretty progressive, and people are pretty open and kind. And I think that it's an unusual community in that sense.
Yeah, so you have
also,
paved roads and plumbing and electricity and all.
Yeah, not everywhere.
but for the most part, you have civilization.
For the most part, yeah, it is civilization. And I think that a lot of people, just sort of piggybacking off of that, think, oh, it's a state school, it's all in-state people. But really only 25% of our student population is from Vermont, because Vermont's a very small state.
Yeah.
So most of our students come from out of state, and a lot of people are surprised to hear that.
When I was doing my homework, I said 80% of the classes are from out of state. I'm like, I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't see that coming. And for a public institution, I don't know I've seen that before. Yeah, really surprising.
Yeah, it is pretty unusual.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's a good segue. So we've kind of talked about these highlights, and I think people we've piqued their interest into knowing more. And then the next natural question is, what are you looking for as in applicants? And so let's get into that application process. What kind of quality? I read that you have a holistic review application process. And so what are some of those qualities that, given how your curriculum is designed, that you value when you're screening applications?
So what we're trying to find is something that's difficult to find. But, aside from the academic capabilities, obviously we want people who are going to be able to do the work. Back in 2013, the AAMC published a paper in Academic Medicine about the qualities, the interpersonal competencies that they thought that incoming medical students should possess. And so we were sort of going through a reorganization of the admissions office at that point, and we sort of designed our process around those core personal competencies. And there's 9 of them. They include things like ethical responsibility for self and others, capacity for improvement, service orientation, reliability, and dependability. And if you can tell from these categories, they're a little sort of nebulous, not so easily measurable. So we try to look for those things in the application that indicate that the student has a good handle on those competencies. And it's harder on paper, so that's why we do the MMI also. We'll get to that later. But so basically we look at the kinds of activities people have done. Have they shown that they have an orientation towards serving other people? Have they shown opportunities where they were able to demonstrate teamwork, oral and written communication? And then on top of all of that, we look for a lot of self-reflection, which is not only the ability to talk about what you've done, but how it impacted you, how it impacted the people that you worked with, and then how you or they were changed by it. And that's a skill that people can learn, and it's a really essential skill for a physician these days, especially with the high rates of physician burnout and stuff. And people who are able to self-reflect are less likely to burn out.
Yeah. I want to interrupt you for a second. This is yet a common theme that I think people that have listened to previous episodes with other admissions people, we say self-reflection, self-reflection, self-reflection. And I'm glad that you brought that up. That's one of the most important things that I think a lot of us like to see, because students always want to know, like, how can I stand out? What can I do to stand out in your application process? And for me, you might agree with this, is that it's the way you write about these things, right? It's the self-reflections.
Exactly.
Can you explain a little bit?
Especially in those little, in that application, when you have list your experiences and you're allowed to pick the 3 most meaningful, those are the ones that our admissions committee looks at the most. And especially that second paragraph that you're allowed to have to talk about what you did. And some people use it much better than other people. But really what we're looking for is that self-reflection. Well, some people just reiterate what they did.
Yep.
The duties that they performed, or the, research that they perform, things like that. But the people that do really well are able to see it beyond that. Like I was saying, not only what they did, but how that affected themselves as well as the people that they were working with. And when it's done well, it really adds a lot of insight into the applicant that I don't think you get anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, this is the juicy stuff that people need to hear. Like, it's not one experience or experiences that we're like, oh, they've done this. Let's bring them in for an interview. No, it's the way that you write about those things and how, like, just what Cary said, that's what sticks out to us when we're screening all these applications. I don't think we can emphasize that enough. Just sticking with the facts doesn't really, like you said, some people do it better than others in explaining those things.
Yeah. So one thing we do when we're counseling students who are going to apply or reapply is to keep a journal of the things that you're doing as you're going on this process, because it's a long process. For some people, it's longer than others, and it's okay. But so we say, keep a journal about all the things that, the volunteer work you're doing, or the, research that you're doing, or the hospital work that you're doing. And every now and then go back and look at what you wrote and see how you've changed since you wrote that. And what, you may go back to one day and you're like, oh, I remember that patient. And then they came back and this happened and that happened. And then because of that, I went and did this. And it's sort of like getting the whole bigger picture. Plus, if you do this journal before you start applying, when you go to make your application, it's going to be that much easier because you will have all this rich material.
Bingo.
And we always like to tell people, the start of your medical journey isn't getting into medical school. It's starting now.
Yep.
All the things you're doing now are going to make you a better doctor in the end. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that when you're like, I've got to get in. I've got to get in.
Yeah. I mean, and to go back when you're talking, I love the journal thing. It's a great tip. I think when you're doing a journal, also jot down the people's names and like contact information. And like when you started it, and how kind of estimate how many hours you're doing things, because like you said, Cary, this is the stuff you're going to have to document in the application process. And you could save yourself a ton of time if you're kind of jotting that information down as you're going along, instead of like, oh, what was that person's email again? And how many hours I think I did that? If you're just keeping a running log, that'll be a huge time saver.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Huge time saver. We talked about your students, and what kind of qualities in the outcomes end of the curriculum do you feel that make for a successful student at Vermont that then translates to your screening process? Are there some qualities that you really value in your current students that make them successful that you're looking for then?
I think that there's a few. The one that just sort of pops into my mind is sort of a tolerance for ambiguity. That's not one of the core personal competencies, but it's one of those things that we're learning more and more. Students that tend to black and white thinking have a harder time doing all the adapting and flexibility that you need to have as a medical student. It's not always straightforward. And so being comfortable with not knowing everything is a really essential skill. And that is something I think that the MMI sort of pulls out in people, the people that are, can just like focus on each individual station as they go through it and not worry too much about the whole process tend to do better.
How about, are there any in your application process or screening process, are there any must-haves? Like we feel you must have clinically related experience. And we feel, since we have a scholarly project, you must have some scholarly work or research experience.
So for us, research is a nice to have, not a need to have.
Okay.
Clinical experience, it's not a requirement, and people can take care of people in different ways and provide, like you said before, depending on how you write about it, being a babysitter and talking about how you take care of little kids could sort of almost substitute for clinical experience. I think that when they talk about clinical experience, we're looking for all kinds of different ways of interacting with people and taking care of people. So as long as you can demonstrate that it's not an absolute necessity, they do want to see some kind of indication that an applicant knows of what they're getting into. I think that would be the biggest bar. Do they understand the medical system? Do they understand what a doctor's role is today, as opposed to on TV kind of thing?
Do you do screen? You did screening for 10 years. Do you still screen?
I still screen, yes.
Yeah. What are some applicants always ask us, like, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see applicants make?
Right. The biggest mistake, yes, is when you're on our secondary application, we ask for 2 short essays, and then there's an optional box where people can put in whatever they want. And for either of the essays or the optional box, every year we get a few people who put one that they wrote for a different school. And they're like, I really am so excited to apply to Tufts. And we're just like, we understand.
We get it.
And,
we laugh we laugh because it's just like, oh yeah, because we see it and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So just a little attention to detail before you hit the send button is a good thing.
Yeah. What else? Can another one come to mind? Like the big mistake? Or not a big, but mistakes that
not big, but
to avoid.
More than a couple of typos is not good.
Yeah.
Again, that
sloppy.
attention to detail. Yeah. And I guess, if you have a personal statement and, using that time to be reflective in that area as well, rather than just relisting all your experiences.
Yeah. That's always
not
kind
a bad thing.
Off.
It's just, it could be more.
Yeah.
So it's not a disqualifier or anything, but you have that opportunity to let the admissions committee know who you are.
Yeah. It could be kind of a wasted opportunity there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks. Those are good ones. I like that. What about gap years? I mean, I think that's a common thing. It's becoming more common as we go in each cycle. I feel like, how does Vermont feel about gap years? You guys advocates, or at least supportive?
Oh,
of
total
students?
advocates. Total advocates for that. In fact, our last year's first year class that we just sat, not the one that's coming in, but I think we had 14% that did not take a gap year. So only 14% coming straight from undergrad.
Wow.
So we tend to really like gap years. And in fact, medical school will always be here. And I think that the more time you take off, the better you do in our process, for sure. We've actually done papers on that. And we just think that it just brings a lot to the class. And one of the things I think that contributes to our community is like all the different places that people have been and things that they've done, they bring with them to school and sort of share that with other students. So it sort of enriches everybody.
Yeah.
So we definitely like non-traditional students.
It's kind of funny, Cary, as we're talking about this. I remember when we could see the multi-acceptance report, and we would accept a lot of the same applicants. It was kind of funny. I remember seeing a lot like, oh, there's another Vermont. Oh, there's another Vermont, when we could see that.
Yeah.
So There's a couple. I was talking with the dean of Irvine, and we would trade a lot with Irvine too. So just some similarities. It's just interesting sometimes the cultures of our institutions and the things that we value in our applicants are shared or similar to other schools. So I can see why, after hearing what you're describing here, why we tend to like a lot of the same students or same applicants. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once somebody makes it, so how does your screening process work? Are there multiple screens that go on, or you want to go into that at all?
Still go in a little bit. There's multiple screens, different times of year, different kinds of screening. But for an applicant that goes through the entire process, so we are one of the schools that require Casper.
Okay.
So we don't need that before we screen, but we do need it before we invite to interview.
Okay.
And then when we screen, we're basically concentrating on that point on the experiences. So we have a little rubric that we fill out that we are sort of the applicant gets assigned a screening score out of 10. And it's just a way so that once they're screened, and they get points for medical experience, exposure, working in medical field, as well as any community service, and then research. So those are the three little categories that we look at for total 10 possible points. So if you had worked full-time in the Peace Corps and had worked full-time in the hospital and then done full-time research, you would get all 10 points, but not everybody gets. So most people don't get 10.
Yeah.
But then when we go to invite to interview, we sort of have a committee that looks at everybody that's been screened at that moment, and they're looking at 4 data points. They're looking at GPA, not only undergrad, but any post-bac or graduate work.
Okay, good to know.
MCAT score, screening score, which is the experiences, and then the Casper scores. So we look at it as 2 academic metrics and 2 non-academic metrics that we're sort of trying to bring in the most diverse group of people to interview, and that we look for people to be strong in at least 3 of those areas. Ideally 4, but most people have one area that's a little less strong than others. And then that's how we invite to interview.
Yeah. Okay, so we made it through the screening process, and now the interview invitation shows up. Walk us through your walk-us-through day experience. From what I read, it's a full day of activities, and you alluded to the MMI. So kind of walk us through what the day's like.
So we have the applicants come in the morning, and we give them a little bit of breakfast. Most people do not eat a lot of breakfast because they're still nervous. And then we have a couple little talks, like the Associate Dean for Admissions will come and welcome everybody. And then we have somebody talk a little bit about the curriculum, just in general, little smattering, just because we know that people are still a little anxious and keyed up in anticipation of the interview part.
Sure.
So we interview usually on a normal day, we interview about 54 applicants. And so half of them will do the MMI first, and half of them will do our teamwork simulation first. In the teamwork, they have to go, and it's a secret, but most people find it enjoyable. And they work together in small groups to do something. And they're rated on that. And then the MMI, half the people will do the MMI first. We have 3 circuits going at the same time. They're all the same questions on each of the circuits. And each applicant would go in to do usually 8 to 9 stations on an interview day. And each question is separate. Each interviewer is separate. And we just love the way that it doesn't introduce any bias. The interviewers don't have any information about the applicant other than their name and their photograph. The interviewers have met and discussed the question with the other people that are doing the same question, so that they all have all the same follow-up questions available to them to use. Like, they won't necessarily use them unless the applicant says something that makes them want to use it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's the applicant's time to shine. They can go wherever they want. And some of them ask them to reflect on their own journey to medicine. Some of them just pose an ethical question. Some of them pose a different kind of scenario. We do have one with a standardized patient where that person is acting a role and the applicant can interact with them in that role. But we don't expect them to be acting. They should just be themselves.
Okay.
And that's pretty much the key to the whole thing. No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Nothing like that. We don't try. None of our questions are gotcha questions at all.
Okay.
I think a lot of people are prepared for that, but we just want to get to know them in a different way than their paper application. And it's really an amazing process. Yeah. We switched about 7 years ago now to the MMI, and I don't think we would ever go back to a one-on-one interview.
Is there a one-on-one interview station?
There's one station that's a little bit more open than the others, and that's kind of our version of the one-on-one, but it's not. It's only 6 minutes long, and it's not any different than any of the other stations.
So you have a very interactive interview day, it sounds like. General advice, as you said, we know applicants, when they come to our schools, there's going to be a level of anxiousness. What's some of your general advice for students coming to interview at Vermont so that they know what to expect and they can feel a little less stressed?
So I think that the biggest thing is to realize that they have done all the work necessary to be successful in the MMI. There's nothing they need to do. There's nothing they need to study. It's just in the moment thinking. And, some of the questions may be things they've never thought about, and that's okay. It's just, how does your thought process work? That's what we're looking for, not how much do you know about this one topic. So just being able to sort of be in the moment, engage with the question in front of you, and then move on to the next one. And I think that, if they can realize that they are capable, they know everything they need to know to do well, and all they have to do is just accept that and be themselves and just go with it. And the applicants who are able to sort of relax, most people, their first station is their lowest because they're nervous, but as they go through it, they get stronger and stronger. We take an average of it. So really, if you had one station that was lower than the others, it really doesn't throw off the score at all.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, that you have experience in this, and you set it up that way to give students a chance that if one station is just that's just didn't go well, or just didn't go as well as you'd hope, you're not ruined. For the rest of the experience.
And we do a briefing beforehand so that if people have questions, and we talk them through exactly what they can expect. And then if they have questions, we can answer them. And then after, we allow them to debrief about it and talk about what they liked and what they didn't like and what stations they had a hard time with or didn't. And that way, because we do ask them to keep everything confidential after the interview day, but we sort of give them that chance to debrief about it.
That's really cool that you get everybody back together then to get their feedback. What's some of the general feedback that you hear when you're doing those debriefing sessions? Is there, what's the feeling like in the room?
Relief. But they're also, I think at that point, they've gotten over the nervousness, and they're just sort of excited and like, wow, I really could do it. And, it sort of builds their confidence up again, that was actually not that bad. I could handle it. It was fun. And, so
that's great. Cool. So after the interview day process, then you have an admissions committee process that then goes through and synthesizes, I have to assume, all the data points and stuff like that. We don't need to go into that. But when you make your acceptances, are you guys rolling or non-rolling?
We are rolling.
Okay.
So we did have an early decision program until this year. We just continued it for next season. So those people would find out on October 1st, but now it'll just be everybody would find out first decisions on October 15th for next year.
Ooh,
we have started doing sorry.
Sorry, but before I get ahead of myself, we need to talk about that picking your campus thing. So after the interview, within a couple weeks, they have to notify you what campus they might be interested in.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah. So after the interviews, and the teamwork, and everybody comes back and has lunch. Oh, I should tell you about this new thing that we started this year.
What's that?
So with the interview reminder, we sent applicants an article to read, sort of along the lines of active learning, like you have to do something before you come here.
Okay.
And then at lunchtime, they participated in a guided discussion with our medical students about this article, which was about race and how that was addressed in medical school for a particular student. And so the students are able to interact with our medical students in a sort of a more formal way than we had done in the past, but also in a way to sort of demonstrate what active learning is like. Oh. And to also talk about diversity issues. So it's been received pretty well so far. And we're really excited about that. But after that, then we go into the presentation mode of the day. And that's when we start talking about the campus selection. Okay. So Liz McElhaney and I, and she's the director of pre-matriculation programs, we talk about the process of it, which is basically after the interview, we send them a survey. We say, which campus do you want? Mm-hmm. And they can choose prefer Vermont, prefer Connecticut, Vermont only, or Connecticut only. And it really, this is the second year we've done it. And the first year, everybody who we accepted, we were able to accept the campus of their choice until the very, very end. And then we had like maybe 2 people of the whole class who didn't get their first choice of campus, but they had said what they're saying by Vermont preferred is that they prefer Vermont, but they're willing to go to Connecticut if it came down to it. Okay. So we asked them to make that decision. We also then have a Skype session with the dean of the Connecticut campus, who comes in and talks about the differences between the Connecticut campus and the Vermont campus. And, there's also some considerations like about significant others and about traveling. So if you're from far away, sometimes it might be easier to be on the Connecticut campus because there's more opportunities to fly into Connecticut, right near New York, 45 minutes away from New York by train. And, so if you had a significant other, it might be easier for them to find a job in Connecticut, although people do find jobs up here as well, but, there's just more opportunities. Sure. So we, go over the pros and cons of each place and give the students enough information that they can make that decision. And then, if they find when that survey comes, they are given 2 weeks to fill it out. It's just one question, but but if they feel like they need more information, they can talk to Dr. Rosen of the Connecticut campus, or we can put them in touch with students who've done their rotations there so that they can get their questions answered and can make an informed decision. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So then when they're accepted to a particular campus. So their acceptance letter would say, you are accepted to the Connecticut campus, or you are accepted to the Vermont campus. Okay.
And can they change after they become med students, or are you kind of locked in?
So we ask them not to change before matriculation, and there is a process once they get here. It has to be kind of pretty extenuating circumstances for that to be allowed. Okay. But, we'll do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Okay. How about this? Is there any gaming or like gamesmanship to like picking the right, if I pick
we thought maybe there would be, but we didn't really see a whole lot of that last year. Yeah. But that being, like I said, we told people up front this year, last year we weren't really sure how it was going to sugar out, but everybody was pretty much able to get their first choice. So we tell them, if you really only want to be at one or the other campus, just choose an only. It just sort of, when we go to the wait list or our high priority wait list, the admissions committee is blinded to the campus decision. So that's not part of their decision at all. Like they don't say, oh, well, this person wants to go to Connecticut, so we won't accept them. They vote accept, not accept.
That's
they don't know that. That comes later in the process.
Because I think that people are like, okay, well, if I read on this, Reddit site that if you pick preferred this or that, that stuff's out there, or people are talking about it. But that's really cool to know that when it comes to alternate list time or wait list time, the committee members don't see that. And so they're not worried about this, Connecticut versus Vermont or whatever. Oh, that's so cool. You said something about a priority wait list and a wait list. What's that mean?
So it may go away next year, but right now, the way it works is when the admissions committee votes, they vote either to accept, to hold, or to not accept. If somebody's voted hold, that's a regular wait list. If somebody's voted accept and we don't have any more seats to offer at the moment, they go on the high priority wait list.
Okay.
And then those people come in first. Last year, we were able to, everybody who was on the high priority out-of-state wait list was either accepted by us or accepted somewhere else and withdrew from us before we accepted them. So the high priority wait list pretty much is guaranteed to, well, not guaranteed, nobody's guaranteed anything,
higher likelihood.
But, a higher likelihood that they will come in than people on the wait list.
And do you tell people do you tell applicants how many people are in each tier?
No, we don't.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
As I could just see that question coming. And I understand why you don't, but I can see I could envision the question coming.
Because we can't guarantee anything and you never know what season's going to bring.
Exactly.
Like last year we made a lot of offers. The year before we made none off the wait list. So you never know.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't want to get people's hopes up.
Yep. I write this in emails frequently and I get it. Like when you're on the alt list, we know that you really want to be here or whatever institution and you're just trying to get as much information as possible. And like you said, Cary, every cycle's different and we never know what's going to happen in April and May. Sometimes it just like takes a cascade of a few schools to start to, kick some dust up and then we all feel the effects. So, or nothing happens and we kind of sit. Yeah. So it's really unpredictable and kind of fun, but also a little scary for us too.
For us too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you always hear stories of those schools that overfilled and then, they had like 40 too many students and that's never happened to us, knock on wood, but
start knocking everybody.
That's
hey, so if a student winds up on the high or the priority wait list or the regular wait list, you want to call it that, do you want to hear from them? If they want to send you their love letter to Vermont, do you want to hear from them or are you kind of good? You just need to wait and see what happens?
So I know people want to do something and feel like they're taking action and letting us know. And we'd love to hear that you're still interested, but we really don't need to know. And the committee would not see that.
Okay.
Only we in the office would see that. So you really don't have to. We've decided not to take update letters this year, but we do take, love letters. But it's not really necessary.
How about letters of recommendation, additional letters of recommendation? Helpful at that point?
No additional letters of recommendation. No.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
hard, I know.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't affect what would happen. So
yeah, I think to know the interest level is always helpful, at least for our school, like kind of knowing who's out there.
Especially towards the end of maybe the end of July, middle of July, knowing if people are still interested and still out there, that's always helpful. If we have to make those last minute decisions. Yeah,
you never know. We never know what's going to happen. So this has been good. Cary, we've tried to touch on, a little bit of everything with regards to UVM. What is there anything you didn't feel we talked about that you wanted to make sure, like when you were kind of thinking about, okay, I'm going to talk with Christian today on this podcast thingy. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure we got across to people?
Well, I think I really wanted to get across the active learning and the VIC and the clerkships. And I think we touched on everything. And the core personal competencies.
Yeah. I'm going to put a link to that. I'm going to find that AAMC paper that you talked about from 2013 that talks about the core competencies, because I think that for listeners, if they went and looked at that, they get more insight into, okay, these are some of the qualities a lot of med schools are valuing and looking for. And we took guidance from this article that came out. So I'll put that.
Yeah. And it gave a lot of definitions too about what they meant by those things, like what they meant by cultural competence.
Oh,
not
great.
Just,
like abstract kind of. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Because cultural competence, or actually we've been started calling it cultural humility. It's working with all kinds of diverse people, not just necessarily talking about, as people go to race and ethnicity, but it's, older people, younger people. It's all different kinds of people. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that the AAMC had like an interactive feature that you could kind of go in and play with the different competencies and see how you might have met them in what you've done.
I'll look that up. I will look that up. And if I can find a link to it, I will share these links in the show notes. So that's I'll look that. I haven't heard about that interactive thing. We'll see if we can track it down. Before we wrap it up here, Cary, what kind of recommendations when you're talking with friends or prospective students or people that you're meeting, that like books that you like to read or blogs or podcasts you listen to or films and that kind of thing? What do you push out to people that are your faves?
Well, podcasts I listen to mostly all writing things, so I won't mention those. I definitely love reading, so I have some books to mention.
Yeah.
So for Christmas, my husband and my son gave me, every 6 weeks I get a box from Powell's Bookstore in Portland, Oregon, and they send me a book that's been signed by an author and then an advanced reader copy of a different book, and then some other little thing. Like the first one was a little patch that said Powell's Bookstore. And the first book they sent me was The Topeka School by Ben Lerner. And it was a book I'd heard about, but I had never thought of getting for myself. And it was so good. I really, really liked that book a lot.
Okay.
And then another favorite book of mine, which is just the most hilarious book. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
It's called Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh. And I read those essays out loud to people and I'm crying. I'm laughing so hard. I can't even get through them.
Okay. These, I think a lot of people right now might have a little extra time on their hands. And a book like that sounds like it might be a nice thing to pick up to kind of distract a little bit from our current situation going on right now.
Yeah, that would be a good one to do it. And it has some really good insight on depression as well.
Okay, cool.
But the story about the goose is the funniest thing I've ever read.
That's one of the essays in there?
Yeah.
Okay. This is great. Good stuff. Anything else?
Oh, I could keep giving you books, but I'll stop.
Come on, if you have a couple more off the top of your head, let her rip.
All right. Well, Left. Have you ever heard of that one by Andrew Sean Greer? It won the Pulitzer Prize last year.
Okay.
So good. It is brilliantly written, and it's a lot about turning 50, but it's also about being an artist. And it's amazing book.
I started reading.
But ultimately,
I pulled up the list of Pulitzer Prize winning book fiction. Nonfiction, and just like to start to read some of those. And so there are some, even some old ones, and so that's been kind of some fun reading for me to check those out. Like really good writing, that's award like the best winning books. So I'll check that one out. What else? You have one more?
Sure. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And that came out about the same time as Left, or at least I discovered it about the same time. And I think I've read it like 4 times in the last year. It's just so good.
Wow.
I've read it in book form twice, and then I've listened to it on tape twice. I really like listening to books on tape when I work out. So
yeah. Oh, these are good ones. Okay, Gail Honeyman. All right, I always put links to these kind of recommendations that are the guests give me. So I hope listeners can go. If you're looking for a little distraction or want to read something other than your biochem books or something, I know time can be sometimes a little limited when you're a student, but this is something at least to go check out. So, this has been great, Cary. This has been
thank you.
Really informative. I always say that, but yeah, it really is. I learned so much when I talk to people like you, and there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences sometimes in the way we do things. But you really were nice about opening up about your process, and I love that transparency. I think it really it's helping a lot of people. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you enough for doing this.
Oh, well, I appreciate the time and the opportunity. I really do.
Oh, Wonderful. Well, hey, listen, I've taken up a lot of your time today, so I'm going to let you go. And I can't wait to thank you in person someday. So I look forward to bumping into you sometime.
Yeah, me too. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Cary. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.